Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Comic Book Geezers. Welcome to another episode of the show. This is a very special episode of the show. We've got in the co-captain's chair today talking about Calico and Sigma Comics, hhgerman or hhgerman. How do you say your name, actually, your last name?
In the DR, it's Herman. Here it's German.
Okay, because I figured it was probably Herman, and that actually sounds better, actually. But yeah, so HH is one of the publishers of Sigma Comics, which is a fairly new publishing company that has so far put out these very cool comics called Calico, or Here Comes Calico, with a brand new hero, brand new star. 3 issues out so far, and number 4, I guess, hot off the presses or set to hit the streets like any day now. So we figured we'd have HH on the show to kind of talk about, the genesis of Sigma Comics and this character and what else you guys might have in store for the readers in the months and years ahead. So if you could kind of give us your background on comics in general and how you got started in this, or what you used to read when you were younger. Because I think we all read comics when we were growing up, and some of us still haven't grown up, and we're still reading comics, and you're publishing comics. So maybe give us some background on you and how you got started on all this.
Well, I'm of Dominican descent. Parents emigrated here in the 60s. Grew up in the Bronx, Pelham Bay, old Italian neighborhood. Still up there kicking. Great Italian food if you're ever interested up in the Bronx. It was an interesting scenario because I was a Dominican kid growing up in an Italian American neighborhood in the 70s and 80s. And it was a bumpy ride. I got into a lot of fights, and don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade it in for the world. It was a wonderful experience. I learned a wonderful language, wonderful people, and a wonderful food, of course, and benefited from all these things. But one of the, there was a language issue early on, because even though I was born here, I spent a lot of early years in the Dominican Republic. So my first language is actually Spanish. And actually my second language, believe it or not, is Italian, because there were a lot of kids straight from Italy in that neighborhood. Oh, when I say Italian neighborhood, I mean Italian neighborhood. And comic books served as an incredibly powerful tool for me to acclimate to living in America, because I was getting these stories, and I started pretty young reading these comic books. I mean, talk about like 5, 6 years old. And when I first started, it was really like Avengers and some of those stories that were a bit more lighthearted. And of course, Spider-Man, which ultimately became my favorite of all growing up. And these were the messages I was getting was, you could look within yourself and be this hero, if you will, to combat all of the evils that were going to be put in front of you every day. And I found that incredibly, I just really identified with my day-to-day life as a, 6, 7, 8-year-old growing up in Pelham Bay. And eventually I learned the language, and I learned so many. My vocabulary just skyrocketed. I'm not kidding you right now. I was going into school, and the teachers were like, where'd you learn that word? Some of them didn't even know the words. And I'm like, well, the penultimate assignment that was given. And they're like, what are you talking about?
I like Stan Lee created that word. That's where I use it, right?
Exactly. And things like this. And then all of a sudden you got a 7, 8-year-old kid, saying goodbye to kids, Excelsior. And, that kind of thing. But it was a wonderful way to connect, to learn the language, to assimilate, to learn about empowerment, self-empowerment. These were the first self-help books, frankly, right? Listen, I think comic books were the first self-help books for young people, because here you were, again, confronted with these difficulties. And, it's not just bullies and things that you had to deal with, the enemies, the supervillains. But, you had things like money issues. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to do this? This chore? Well, if I get home this time, all these daily struggles that, struggles that we encounter as kids, but you were able to learn about how this is how you pay the bills. This is how you were able to, sweep, Mrs. Gaffney's, garage or something. Now I got an extra, $2, and then I could get this done. So there's so many wonderful value added components that you learn from comic books. And that's it. Growing up in the Bronx, day to day, reading comic books, to me, they were an essential tool in my daily, lifestyle kit, like a hammer, and a carpenter. So, and that's how it started. The Calico concept started many years later. I've always been a fan of animals, and I've seen unfortunate images of animals being mistreated and frankly abused, and worse. And I was just, as a former fighter, I probably should have mentioned that as well. I grew up fighting. I became a boxer at a very high level. When I saw these things behind the screen, I was enraged because I knew that there was something I could do if I was confronted with these people, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I just couldn't do it because most of the time I was seeing this, in fact, overwhelmingly, the majority of the time I saw it was behind the screen. And I was so angered. And mind you, I'm a person who has like no temper. I never yell or scream or anything like that. And I think boxing has a lot to do with that. Because there's a daily output of steam when you train for boxing. So you're able to hone your anger, if you will. I was ready to commit murder, frankly, when I would see these poor, innocent little animals being, mistreated like this. And I said,
who can't defend themselves, right?
Right. And I would hear in just in passing conversation, and it was a steady stream of comments. Oh my goodness, if someone ever did something to my dear, Fifi, or, to my pet, I'd kill him. I'd go to jail or this and that. And it was that awakening. I heard it enough times, and I connected it back to the sense that I got when I saw these poor animals being, mistreated and hurt and injured. I said, you know what? I bet if I create a character, if I focus on writing a character, because I am a writer, and this started not as a comic book, but as a novel. And my thing was, what if I work on a character that I start writing, and it's about his absolute devotion, love of animals, and how he's enraged, and he has the wherewithal to actually do something about it. He's a former boxer. And that resonated with me. They say, write what you know. And that was the start of Calico.
So in a sense, this guy is basically you.
It's me without any laws.
This is vigilante you, right?
Yeah, exactly. If there was a world that, you could dip into, say goodbye to this one, close the door and go into this, comic book world, this would be me, frankly. Yeah, it would. Because I used to fight, and I trained in the Morris Park section of the Bronx, and I had very, very good tutelage there. And I don't know if the audience here knows not much about boxing, but boxing is it's a very cliquey sort of sport, and the gyms are vastly different, and in their training, how they train these fighters. Philly fighters are very different from New York fighters versus California fighters, which are more polished, and versus like Boston fighters, which are, a lot of them are straight brawlers, right? And there's so many styles. I mean, boxing is just a wonderful story. This is why there's so many analogies in life about boxing, right?
Yeah.
So, wow, having lived that experience as a boxer, I said, man, I can inject so many colorful, textured stories into this rich world of the Calico, and I think this character really, at its very root and foundation, the character directly identifies with millions of people all around the world, because animals are way more than pets. They're your family. I want everybody in the audience, I'm going to ask your audience to do two things today. Everyone, when you have a chance, do a search for Spain recognizes animals as sentient beings and citizens. Animals today receive citizenship by the country of Spain. They have ID cards and everything with their picture, the date of birth and everything, and they're to be respected as citizens of Spain. It's an incredible thing. And this makes me feel good. And this is exactly why we do this comic book. And it's just wonderful. Things like that. This is why, if all of us in some capacity, in my case, of comic books, do something to further the quality of life of these poor little animals and how we've historically mistreated them, I think we're going to be in better shape as a society, and that's something I'm very proud of. That's why we love doing this comic book. It's a gift.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points. I'm an animal lover, as we've discussed before on email and stuff. And I have
Right.
3 dogs, and we've always had dogs. I've grown up with animals my whole life, and I, contribute to various animal foundations and things like that. And I think that we, as human beings, can reach our fullest potential, and by the way we treat not only ourselves, by the way we treat our furry friends, right? And I think that people who treat animals badly also treat other human beings badly, and really don't love themselves either. I think there's a direct correlation between our treatment at the individual level with animals to how we treat our fellow human beings, and how we treat ourselves and think about ourselves. And I think that's very, very important. And I think we can unlock a lot of animals bring out, I think, the best in us.
I agree.
And I think that's very important. I think that's one of the most important things to having an animal in your life, and respecting that animal in the right way, because it brings out certain qualities in that particular human being that may never come out, right? And it's an interesting conversation, and that's one of the things that attracted me to this book, is because I am such a animal lover and advocate, and I love comics and strong comic book superhero characters. And this guy, meaning this guy, he feels just like I do, right? And just like obviously you, because he's kind of patterned after you. So when did you decide, okay, I've got to take this whole idea to the next level to create a comic book company and make this happen? When did you actually say, this is what we're going to do?
Well, like any person, I'm human. And one of my friends, when we had quarantine last year, 2020, or the year before last year now, I was dating someone, and she got a book deal, okay, at a large, reputable firm. And we went to the park. I live in New York. We went to the park, and we had a little picnic outdoors. And in saluting her, I said, congrats on this. It's one of the things I've always wanted to do, is, put out a novel. I've written tons of different, mediums, but a novel is not something that I've ever published, even though I have had something in the works in the past. And she said, you have so many ideas. By now, she got to know me very well. She saw a lot of my work. She said, you're really good at this. Why don't you put something out? And how about that cat character you were talking about? Now that we're in quarantine. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna take that off the shelf. And so the Calico concept as a novel was quite a few years back. 2009 is when I originally jotted down the main outline. So sure enough, 2020, quarantine, I start writing about a week's worth of outline for a novel. And the more I read the outline, I said, this sounds like a comic book character here, And I think if I did that, it would be really interesting, because I've always wanted to do a comic book. And let me try it that way. And sure enough, the words came off the page much easier as a comic book. And that was really the nexus of it. And then I realized I had something. So I said, I went to art school. I went to School of Visual Arts. So yeah, I can draw, but I'm not a comic book artist. I'm not a cartoonist. It's a whole different, genre of art. So of course, I went back to my alma mater, and I was looking in the illustration department. And I find one person there, the head of it, and I'm like, all right, let me send him an email. And it sounds like, maybe a student, somebody who's ready to graduate, send them some early freelance money and get them started. And this way helps me. I keep scrolling down on this page, and I see the words Klaus Janson. And I'm like, did I see that right? And of course, Klaus Janson is on the faculty. And I'm like, holy crap, but you got to be kidding. And I already had the email written out for the first person, the first guy. I had to rewrite the thing, the rewrite. I spent like half a day rewriting the email, because the emails are on there. So, of course, I send an email to Klaus Janson, the legendary Klaus Janson, not expecting to hear back. And of course, I name drop my dean of students at the time and mentor. and Richard Wild, wonderful, mentor for graphic design, frankly, and advertising. And he was a contemporary of Milton Glaser, another wonderful legendary graphic designer who designed the I Love New York logo. So of course I had to name drop, do something to get a response from, Klaus Janson. A day goes by, a week goes by, I don't hear anything. Of course, well, I forget about it. I'm at a barbecue in Brooklyn, okay? Of course, eating veggie burgers. Fully I get an email from Klaus Janson saying, hey, HH, love the idea, love the email. Here's my cell phone number. Give me a ring tomorrow. We'll chat about this. Looking forward to chatting with you. I drop my phone. It's glass all over the place, cracked, I'm like screaming, holy crap. Everybody's like, what the hell's going on with this guy? And of course, that, in the long story short, it winds up being many months long conversations about the characters, many half-hour conversations with Klaus Janson on the phone, going back and forth. This man is just wonderful. He gave me tons of time, gave me great guidance. And frankly, if I would have put out the character as it was in my mind, it would look totally different than what it eventually wound up being. I sent so many drafts. I was the first artist of the Calico. I drew him first. Okay, I still have the original sketches. And you could see piece by piece the progression. And after the conversations I was having with Klaus, and I would, out of respect, I would call him Mr. Janson, but he told me, listen, I don't want to hear that word. Call me Klaus, So it's not that I'm disrespecting. But yeah, I credit him enormously. So he was my guiding force early on.
He became your mentor here on this project, basically, yeah.
He was unequivocally my mentor. And he was not, and I told him, I'm the kind of person who, here's the thing about art school, okay? If you go to a good art school, good solid 4-year art school, where you have these incredibly talented teachers who are, all of them are in the industry, right? They're going through their hardships as they're teaching you, okay? These people pull no punches whatsoever. They will take your work and they will rip it to shreds, okay? And I told Klaus this after our first conversation. I said, listen, I know now you have the idea, and we've had this wonderful conversation, went on for like over a half hour, the first one. And I want you to approach me kind of like a student. I know I'm older now and I've done all this bodies of work. This is my first time in comics. I want you to, lean into me. He ripped me to shreds. His first shot, it's like, dude, you don't even have to tell me this, okay? He ripped me to shreds. He wrote me a tome of, you got to do this, you got to do that. Imagine me sitting here looking at this. I'm the audience, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just a wonderful guiding, first step. And that really was the thing that helped me have Calico look and feel like he does today. When you had that visceral response to Calico that you just started with here, you're saying this is a character that really resonates with me because I love these animals and I can understand what's going on. That's what you get when you marry good, strong writing with wonderful art that resonates directly with the concept of that character. It's an art form, but it takes a lot of, you start with that clay, okay? And you really have to keep, chiseling and chiseling down and whittling the smallest of little clays so that you see that picture, so that when you read that character, you are transported to that other dimension, if you will.
Yeah. So how'd you come up with the name sigmacomics? And I want to kind of get as close as I can on the camera here. So for folks who are, maybe been around the block a while and have been reading specifically Marvel comics for quite a long time, there was always an ad in all the old issues of Marvel comics going back to the 70s. Robert Bell comics, right? So Robert does everybody should recognize this little reinterpretation of the Mighty Thor. I don't know how good there we go. So that should be a very familiar image to many, many people. So that is also your kind of like your logo for Sigma Comics, with that kind of without the the little wings on the helmet Thor, which was synonymous with Robert Bell Comics, who was a great mail order service back in the day. So how did that, so maybe you can talk a little bit about your affiliation with Robert Bell.
Right. So pretty much after everything was sort of affixed in stone, and I had to decide, all right, well, we have to do a publishing company. It's either that or, approach Image and, try to sell them on this. And
Yeah.
frankly, I think this is a really, really strong concept that we can ourselves develop. And I've always been sort of a business kind of person. And, I went to art school, but right out of school, I was more of an advertising marketing guy. My degree is in advertising. So I wanted to see this thing, my own hands of labor, take this thing out and share it with the people and not go through another medium. And I said, I want to do this my way. That individual streak. I've always been, if we look at the Greek characterizations, the sigma alpha, the beta, the sigma, I've always been more of a sigma. And the sigma mindset is very individualistic. He or she is someone who has alpha type qualities, but doesn't feel the need to follow or be followed. We could just do this on our own. We don't need anyone, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, the truth is you do kind of need people to help you get going, but the Sigma mindset is, you guys all, we're going to do it our way kind of thing. That Frank Sinatra song, beautiful Frank Sinatra song. And I started researching the Sigma, so more texture on it. And then I said, wait a minute, I'm starting to look into comic. Maybe we should do an homage to people who just really just rolled up their sleeves and said, you know what, heck with what you guys are doing, I'm going to do it my way. And the first image, frankly, that came to my mind was, as I started looking through all those old comics, because that's the essence of, and you get it so well when you do these videos, the essence of our comic books is that old 70s, 80s sort of grit in your teeth, comic books. That roll them in the back of your pocket, put them back in there, and just spend a good couple hours just chilling, in your favorite comfortable spot with whatever your drink is, comic book. And before that, I went out and I said, let me at least take a look at what comic books are doing today. And I don't want to insult any of the creators today. The art is incredible. It's so beautiful, a lot of it. But the writing just, it didn't impact me the way these comic books did. And I went back to my old comic book collection, and man, this image kept coming up over and over and over again. You could always count it. I don't care what Marvel comic book it was. It was that Robert Bell, iconic mail order ad. And I said, you know what? This is a Sigma right here, because this guy said at that time, okay, he said, F you to all of you. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to create this whole way of buying comics. Yeah. And the more I started researching Bob Bell, started reading about him. There's a wonderful book by Dan Giorino. It's called Comic Book. Okay, it's called Comic Book, and colon and something else. But Robert Bell is featured in this book. And it's a wonderful book. I recommend it to everyone in your audience, so you can learn about the comic book industry, the turn of the century, starting in the 30s, and of course elevating into the 40s and 50s. But Robert Bell was a character who came around in the 50s and 60s and said, listen, I love these comics. He started getting a good collection of them as a comic book fan. This is the thing. When you start out as a fan of something, you really understand it and love it and understand how you would like to engage with that product, because you yourself are a prime purchaser of it. So here's a man who was a huge fan of comics, had a massive collection of comics. Then he had family members, eventually who were also into this. And people were coming to him, hey, how can I get this comic about, and all of a sudden that turns into a business. And then he facilitates the business, not only in his neighborhood, but all across the country. Yeah. And it resonated with me. And I told this to Bob Bell when I had the first conversation with him, because he and I are, we're now friends. I got emotional in the conversation because I told him that my father, who emigrated here in the 60s, would work nights. He worked 2 jobs. Both of my parents worked in the hospital system. Imagine working in the New York hospital system back in the 60s and 70s. Imagine working that night shift, and then day shifts and all this. So he found by the time he was getting off, all the candy stores and when you get the comics were closed. You can get comics at getting out at 1 in the morning, whenever you got out of work. And he saw one of my comics, and sure enough, there was a Bob Bell ad in there. And he started doing the mail order because he wanted to get his kid comics, because he knew I love comics. And that was a wonderful connection. This man helped my parents buy me comics. I got emotional. I'm trying to resist it now. But he's a wonderful man, and I could tell you that he's doing really well in South Florida. He lives in I lost my dad not too long ago, so I told him about that, and I told him about how proud I was as someone who would continue to see his ads in all my old comic books, and how the comic books were seminal to my American experience. It was a wonderful thing, and by this time my dad had passed. And we were talking about that and all that. And, I engage with him regularly. So I was trying to get him on this show, but he's jet setting all over the place. So he goes to Vegas and, travels all over the place. And he's in South Florida, wonderful man and a wonderful inspiration. And he was the image I had in mind for.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, Robert Bell was such an important part of so many comic book lovers' lives back in the day. I mean, my esteemed colleague Bill, who shares the show with me. I mean, Wild Bill was a regular Robert Bell customer for many, many years. I never was personally, because I had a great newsstand in my town in Goshen, New York, as a matter of fact, where my father took my brother and I every Saturday and Sunday morning. So I had all the new stuff. I knew that I would have access to whatever was coming out. So I never did the mail order thing back in the day, because I really didn't have to. But I know Bill talks exclusively about how he didn't have that little newsstand or candy store type of atmosphere. So he lived out in the middle of nowhere, and so he did the mail order thing for many, many years. And he relied on that, right? And he always talks about how they came in those little paper bag type of wrappers and all this. So how many, especially New Yorkers, because that was kind of like a New York thing, right? Robert Bell to comic lovers in New York was like, if you couldn't get the comics firsthand from somewhere in retail, that's who you used, right? So it's such part of comic book history here on the East Coast. That's really cool. So that's someone really, the fact that you were able to kind of work this out with him and stuff, I think is really neat, and that's got to feel good for you.
Despite being someone who has this individualistic mindset, I knew that I wanted to rely on the past, because again, if you look at what we're all about telling these gritty stories, and that's our foundation. And like I said, this man, everybody knows, as you just mentioned, Bob Bell. He was the internet before the internet for comics.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's a great way to put it. Yep, yeah. That is true. So now your comics here. So right now, the only title you have on Sigma is Calico for now, right?
Right.
These are available exclusively online, or are you doing any retail with these right now?
Yeah, we're doing everything, all the above. So we do direct sale to the shops, and it's not many. Unfortunately, when you do that, you're dealing directly with Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
And as an indie, it's hard, because they stick you in the back, and then they turn around and say, oh, well, your comics aren't really selling them. Well, if you put them by the register, they're really well priced specifically for that.
Yeah.
And we find that when we have really in-depth conversations with these retailers, and they finally get it and they start reading the series, they start putting it up front, and it starts selling really well, because this is the kind of comic book that you put in your bag right before you're going to get out. Oh, look at this. You have your comics already, all right, and you're ready to pay, and then you see these $2-3 comics up there. Oh, look at this. What the art's amazing. That gets you in.
Yeah.
And then you start with these powerful, if you've noticed, right on the very first page, we don't waste time, with our action, okay? I don't care what comic book you pick up, that first, there you go. Right. Right. Page one.
Action and blood on page one.
Right. Someone's losing a leg on page one. I mean, right. So that's how we operate. In the Bronx, there's this funny saying. It's like, you don't have time to think about what you're going to do when you get punched in the face. A mugging in the Bronx is you're already on the floor. then you can start thinking about what you're going to do. If you're going to fight back, get up first and then fight back and run away, whatever you're going to do, or talk your way out of it, which, believe it or not, actually worked in New York. So that's sort of the way we did it. And this is why these comic books are so wonderful when you understand what they're about. They're about gritty, in your face storytelling from back in the day, which you do not get today. And again, this is why I was shocked. You don't just start doing comics. You have to go out and see what the status quo is and see what's going on today with comics. And I hadn't picked up a comic book in decades. Okay, up until when I decided to do the reconnaissance and say, all right, well, let's see what comic books are like today. And I walked away shocked. I was like, are you kidding me? If this is what it's like today, we're gonna go in there full-fledged, right in your face, down your throat comics, Vince Lombardi style. We're gonna keep running that sweep down your face, down your throat. And that's our style. And these are not boring comics, let me tell you. If those of you in the audience who haven't read Here Comes Calico and you need an increase in blood pressure, this is it. Read these comics.
Well, that's a good lead into my next question here. So, yeah, I mean, these are obviously comics for, more mature readers. These are very intense, at times violent comics, right? And this is very different. I oftentimes, when I've read these first 3 issues, it's like, you've got this vigilante character. He's kind of like a Bruce Wayne Batman on steroids, but from a different place, right? Because it's really interesting to hear your background in the Bronx, and then in knowing these books now, I can kind of see where the genesis of this character came from. So now I even have a better understanding hearing it from your lips. But this is not Batman capturing the criminals and sending them to Arkham Asylum to get rehabilitated. And as we know, throughout the history of Batman comics, those villains keep getting out. They either get let out for good behavior or they break out. They're never rehabilitated, right? And right. If you've been following any of like more recent comics, especially on the DC side, like there's the whole Superman killing, the whole Injustice series where, Superman winds up killing the Joker because the Joker is responsible for the death of Lois Lane. And, Batman is absolutely appalled because that's not what you do. You don't kill the bad guys, right? You got to rehabilitate him. And then you've got Superman saying, but you've had decades to deal with this guy. And he still gets out and look what he just did. So I am totally justified in doing what I did. So the reason I bring that up is because, I've seen we've covered all of your comics here on the channel. I've seen a couple comments from a couple viewers who have a hard time with the violence in these, and specifically the whole, okay, this character goes and finds the bad guys who are doing real harm to our beloved animals. And Calico is not interested in getting these guys rehabilitated, right? He's taking them down. And in really bad ways. There are some folks that's a little much. And so how do you kind of explain this concept to someone like that who is used to the kind of cleaner, neater way things turn out in the comics that we've all had? And this is a bit more brutal and, to some people a little upsetting, right?
The Calico story is a practical comic book story. Okay, it's set in the real world. Okay, it's not Gotham City, it's New York City. When we're in Corona, Queens, we're in Corona, Queens. Okay, we're referencing actual landmarks, actual neighborhoods. The Calico is the hero, the anti-hero, frankly, for the practical comic book reader. Okay, yes, we all want to be transported to a different place, but when you're transported to the Calico universe, it's not far from home, so to speak. It's one that you recognize. That's why the wonderful Javier Orbich did a wonderful job capturing New York City. And listen, when I had these conversations with all of our artists, especially Javier though, because he's the interior artist, I said, listen, I'm not going to draw this comic book. I'm gonna entrust you to this. But there you go. Look, I mean, just take a look at that. And I'm going to entrust you to depict New York. Okay, the gyms, the dingy gyms of New York, the gritty basements, the streets of New York in a very realistic way, so that these people, they get that sense. Hey, we're in Woodlawn in the Bronx, or we're in, Dobbs Ferry. We were in Rye, New York on issue 1, which is, Westchester.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So listen, we want people, there you go. We want people for that to resonate. And it's a practical comic book. If you have a leak, you got some people that are happy to go to Home Depot and get that putty thing that you put around and it hardens up. You got those people, and you got people who are like, you know what, we're going to cut a section of this pipe off. All right. And we're going to weld that thing back. We're going to turn the water off, weld it back, because you know what? Problem solved. Okay. In about a year or two, you might get a leak on that first way to do it. That's Gotham. That's DC. We don't do that. We're going to take your arm off. Okay. Because you know what? If you're beating that dog or kicking that dog, that thing's going to keep dripping on that poor dog's head. It may not be the next day after he gets that beating, but maybe it's, 7-8 months from now, after the guy realizes, all right, well, I got my beating, and he forgets about it. People forget the scars. Scars heal. You know what doesn't heal? A leg chopped off. You want to kick a dog? I see. I'm going to resist upsetting some of your watchers right now, but there are videos on YouTube where people do this. Okay, and there's one in particular with this a-hole. He looked like a college student in his 20s, maybe his teens, late teens. And there's a little cat, and he's luring the poor little cat. Hey, little cat, hey, and little, making like he's got food for him. The cat, little innocent cat's going up to the guy, and sure enough, as the cat approaches, and he's a tall guy, lanky, so he puts his foot all the way back and he kicks the cat, and the kick, it's like a football. I was gonna break my laptop. If that guy was in front of me, I would have been in prison, because I would have destroyed him. I would have ended him right there. What that guy did to that cat, it's terrible.
There's no reason for it.
No, and you don't put putty on that and think that a guy like that's going to stop. A guy like that, like you said before, they've got problems, and because of whatever happened to them, they feel the need to impart that hatred, anger, violence to other people, in this case, animals. They don't do it to people. A lot of them don't, to people their size. Notice I said the guy was a big guy, okay? When you're bullied as a kid, okay, now I'm going to resonate with everybody here, because we all had, if you weren't directly bullied, we saw it, okay? And we did something or we didn't say something, but we saw it in the playground. It's bad enough that your bully was, a little bigger than you, or maybe a little smaller than you, but that person had some fire in them as a kid. When you do that to a little pet, that's like a giant picking you up off the street. Okay, imagine like Godzilla taking you, literally bending down, I don't know, 100 feet, and then bending down and picking you up, depending on how small the animal is, and just bashing you. And that's what happens when you abuse an animal. When you abuse an animal as a human being, what you're doing is you're taking a small little family member who loves you, okay? And you're picking them up off the ground, elevating them into the air, and just doing horrible things. It's so upsetting. It's so upsetting. It's not just bullying. It's disastrous. It's a giant who's bullying, and it's terrifying. And the anger and rage that boils up into someone who knows how to effect magnificent violence, targeted violence on another human being. When I was sparring, I got to a very high level in boxing, okay, to the point where I was sparring with people like Aaron Superman Davis, a 2-time world champion. Yeah. The gym that I went to in the Bronx, Morris Park, which is now called Star Boxing, which is just a hotbed of wonderful professional fighters and champions, has put out fighters like Aaron Superman Davis, Louis Honeyboy Del Valle, who fought Roy Jones Jr. Back in the 90s, who was unequivocally the best cruiserweight, light heavyweight champion in the history of boxing. Roy Jones Jr., unequivocally the best light heavyweight fighter in the history of boxing, okay? Was the first person to put Roy Jones Jr. down. This is all to say that, also home to the infamous Louis Resto, who fought in the Davey Moore undercard and wound up he was the guy who, he fought this guy from, I think it was Oklahoma, this young up and coming prospect back in 1983 in Madison Square Garden. Louis Del Resto fought this guy, and he didn't have padding in his It was learned at the end of the fight that the gloves didn't have padding. And this guy took such a beating, and he wound up committing suicide like 7, 8 months later, because a lot of them attributed to that loss and beating he took. But incredible history in that gym, all sorts of good history, bad history. We don't walk away from it, because that's life. Life is gritty and it's real. And I rubbed shoulders with all those guys, and I took and gave beatings in that gym. And we learned how to hone our skills in a very focused, respectful, and disciplined way. And that's something I didn't have as a kid. And I got great discipline in the boxing gym. This is why you see, you'd think, why aren't boxers in the news every single day for beating? You see all these football stars like every other day, basketball players and all these people beating their wives and driving cars, even golf players, doing all sorts of mayhem in the news every other day. Why the hell aren't boxers in the news every single day for doing this? And it's because we have the best outlet of all. They give, you think it's counterintuitive. Why the hell are you going to give a kid from the inner cities, the bad, they're having a rough time, they're getting into fights. Why would you give boxing lessons to the kid? It's the best thing you possibly do, because it teaches them.
Let them take all that out in the gym, right? Yeah.
It teaches them so much. When you give it out, guess what? You're going to take it too. So there's a price to pay for these things. And then once you start recognizing that there's a price to pay, then you start recognizing that there's a fuel capacity that you have. You can't just beat 24/7, meaning you have to self-manage. A fighter is one of the most well-managed individuals in society, because they understand the true cost of these things. And this is why, white-collar boxers exist. This is why, youth boxing leagues exist. Boxing is a wonderful way to hone yourself, manage yourself, in a really respectful way. And again, it's a long answer, but we have a practical hero that is practically applied in the stories of Here Comes Calico. He's someone everybody, I don't care if you're a man, woman, old lady, young guy, old guy, whatever, everybody resonates with the Calico. And we think we have a wonderful series for everybody.
Yeah, and I think if you're one of the aspects of the series that I really like, for me, it's the extreme injustice against animals that really gets me. The stuff where they're doing it for monetary reasons, and like, for instance, dog fighting. That happens all over the world, right? And people make money off of that. And what happens to these poor dogs, right? We know what happens to them. These guys, these crazy hunters who will go and they will illegally sneak into a sanctuary in Africa or wherever to shoot that lion or that rhinoceros just so they can take a stupid selfie picture, right? And have something on their wall, right? When they're doing it illegally, right? Or these poachers who sneak into these protected reservations to get that elephant tusk or that rhino horn or something. I mean, these are animals that are disappearing off the face of the earth by the thousands. And yet, because they could get a couple bucks, right, they're willing to break the laws to do that. That's the stuff that, like, and I mean, let's not even get into the everyday abuse that happens in people's households, right? But this is the stuff that's done purposefully for monetary gains. It's just, it's crazy. So, right. I think that this character, what's great about him is that he is out and he's got his network out there looking for stuff like that, and he's going to find the bad guys. And these villains are not guys that have done it once. They're guys who do it over and over and over again. And so those are the ones that need taken care of, right?
Right. It is the egregious indulgence and just greed and sloth and just viciousness of humanity incarnate. These people. The Calico says in issue 2, he's got nothing against hunting. Hunting is a natural part of our survival, frankly, on our planet. It's due to hunting that we actually exist. Right. There's issue 2, wonderfully drawn there by Garnabiel, our cover artist. And again, a practical hero. He does not say all hunting is bad. You have to be vegan down your throat and all this other business. No, what he's saying is precisely what you just said. Humanity has an element to it, a component to it, that is egregiously self-indulgent and abuses planet Earth, okay, Mother Earth, which we all come from, okay, to an extent where it's a direct affront to all of us as beings on this planet. Yeah. For you to purposely go in knowing full well ahead of time that this animal is in danger, okay, you're going to go in there like an a-hole and blow a hole in this poor little animal in front of the little the little puppies and the little cubs. You are the slimiest, and I can't even say these words here. Okay, if we were in the studio and we're writing these comics with my team, you'd be hearing a lot of bad words right now. But yeah, let me tell you something. If I ever got there's a an actor that most of us who are pretty much all of your audience is going to know. Okay, he doesn't have a good reputation now, but when these movies were coming out, okay, he had a very good reputation, especially this scene. And the guy is Steven Seagal. Okay, think what you think of him. He had a movie in it was called Out for Justice. Okay, it's called Out for Justice, where he's going around. I think it's in Brooklyn. Anybody seen Gino? Anybody know who killed Bobby Lupo? And he's playing like a cop who's going after these mob guys. And at the end, he rubs shoulders with. He comes across this guy who's kicking his dog or doing something, and he puts him in his place. Let's just say that's a G-rated version of what I would do to that guy. You guys are on Netflix or whatever, you Amazon Prime. Out for Justice is a good movie. Again, think what you think of Steven Seagal now, but back then, especially in that movie, he did a good job in that movie, especially to the guy who's beating that dog. So
Yep. That crossed the line right there. Yep. So we got 3 issues in the can. Number 4 is coming out now. So I know we have a lot of folks here who have chimed in when we've covered these that have, I guess, are subscribers now and actually purchased the comics online. So do you have now that issue 4 is coming out? So what else? Do you guys have any other ideas for new characters and series for Sigma, or are you just concentrating on Here Comes Calico for right now?
Right. Here Comes Calico is our foundation, and we really want to make sure we get this right. We're not going to entertain any other characters until we complete the Here Comes Calico series for that reason. So we want to make sure, we're approached every day for different things. Oh, NFTs, and let's do this concept of video game. We don't even have a full story yet. Okay. So we want to really focus all of our attention on getting Here Comes Calico, the 8-issue miniseries, completed first. And then from that, use that as a launch pad to other things. Whether that is a continuation of the Here Comes Calico story, which is most certainly where we want to first go, because we think we have a wonderful trajectory for it. And we already have a daily growing every day install base of this character. And then other characters as well. So that's in the works. The Here Comes Calico issue, volume 1, Pinup Gallery, is available right now in Sigma Comics. 1, 2, 3. 4 is pre-order right now on Kickstarter. So every single person who's watching this video, literally right now, just open up a window on your computer, Kickstarter, because if you type in Sigma Comics or Here Comes Calico, issue 4 is going to come out. Every single person, I don't care what you think, okay, about this topic or how we cover it, or if you haven't read our comics yet, please open up a window right now, kickstarter.com. This is a wonderful cause. And again, however you feel about this issue, you're going to get an entertaining story. That is for sure. So that's something I can guarantee you. You're not going to be bored. It's going to take you right into the topic. It's not going to tippy-toe around it. If you're someone who cares about animals and you have any thought whatsoever about animals being abused, every single one of you right now, go to kickstarter.com and type in Sigma Comics. You're going to see our comic book. This show is wonderful. You mentioned before that some of your readers are now turning into our customers, and that's absolutely true. We credit shows like yours, Comic Book Geezers, a wonderful show. I was attracted to it mainly first because of the title. I said, oh, look at this interesting title here. I bet these guys would really resonate with the whole mantra we have of really, Sigma, the Sigma Comics, where we're going to do this our way, like the old Bob Bell logo. They're going to identify it. They're going to resonate right away. They're going to know what we're talking about. And sure enough, it was immediate. We sent you guys the issues, and it resonated with you. And we really appreciate the coverage that you're giving this series. It's a very substantive. That's one thing I'm going to tell your audience. you could hear everything I'm saying as a creator, because it's going to be biased, right, for our comics. When I say every single person, I'm serious, because again, everything I've said is biased. On the top of that page, the Here Comes Calico #4 page, there's a video, okay? And those people are not biased, because those people are comic book veterans and experts, okay, like Pete, like Wild Bill, who also appear, by the way, in that video. And they're telling you from the horse's mouth what they think about that comic book. These are people who haven't just been reading comic books for years, not for decades, but for generations. Okay, these are people who have spent tens of thousands of dollars on comics, this wonderful and mighty American art form that is comic books. Okay, exactly. And that's just the ones that are on display. Okay, so you can only imagine what this man has. Okay, when you're getting comic book commentary for these people, this isn't like getting somebody off the street saying, "Oh yeah, you should get this comic book." No, this is a vested comic book expert and veteran, okay, who has had a wide range of emotions since the time they were very young to this day, this very day. They're telling you to go out and get this. So every single person who's watching this video, please stop what you're doing, go to kickstarter.com, and don't listen to me. Don't read any words that's on that page, because they're all biased too. Click on that video and sit back for a good 8-9 minutes, because it is a long video. It's the longest video we've ever done, okay? Because we want you to hear everybody that's saying what they're saying about that comic book. And I guarantee you that when you turn that last page of that comic book, you're going to be blown away, okay? Issue 1, and I'm going to tell you right now, for those of you who have weak stomachs, go through that experience. It's not going to be easy, because what happens to the people in that comic book is downright terrifying. It's been called the most terrifying thing that's happened to a human being in a comic book multiple times. We just started doing conventions, Pete. So we have people. Before it was people sending us messages, via the comment system that we have on the website. We have people coming up to our booths. We were at Emerald City. We were at New York Comic Con. We were at C2E2 in Chicago, and we're gonna do a bunch of other shows this year. And people are coming in there. Oh my God, issue 1. And they're just like high-fiving us, like finally we've got somebody who's bringing real justice into these, yeah. I mean, frankly, I'm a writer, and I'm at a loss for words for the extreme level of violence. What happens to this guy? Okay, this animal, a-hole, abuser and killer and murderer, frankly. So in that issue 1, because we sat down and said, we're going to go hard. We're not going to pull punches. When you have somebody hurt, and you understand something with fighting. Here's another disclosure, is as a fighter, and especially one from New York and from the Bronx of all places, you've been into a lot of fights. I've been in hundreds of fights, okay? And there are many times in some of these fights where I'm not kidding right now. There's a chance you get to a point at some part of the fight where you think like, I may die in this fight, depending on what happens here. This is my life now. I don't know what he has in his pocket or whatever, and I've just hit him. And now there's a little space between us. I have to close the gap. You have to start thinking. What happens to these people, it comes straight from, the thoughts that I've had in the middle of fights. It's purely visceral. It's that blackout violence where you're like, it's me or that person. And how are we going to do this? This is why we actually have people who are in MMA and fighting and boxing.
Yeah.
Say, well, that was very realistic, really rendered. Like that's how it is. You see in comic books, Superman coming down and giving this punch as his hands over here and his other arms down there. That's not how you do it, my friend. But when you have people who understand fighting, and if you love, the essence of comic books is conflict. And this is what I think is lost on the writers today. Some of them haven't ever been in a fight. You never even been punched in the face, and you're talking about a hero fight, punching another one into a, through a wall. You haven't even been punched in the face, but what are you talking about fighting? You don't even know the first thing about fighting. Let me tell you who knows about fighting. This guy right here. Okay, so when you pick up a Here Comes Calico comic book, rest assured that you're gonna get the texture and color and hue and tonality and perspective and smell of fighting. It's going to be in your face. And it's not to say that you have to be a fighter. No. It's to say that you have to understand fear and what kind of impact you have when you see your family member abused and killed, and what you're going to do about it. This is our Death Wish character for animals.
Yeah, good. That's a good point.
This is our Bronson. This is our Bronson. We finally have a Bronson, Charles Bronson, for animals. And that's all I'll say.
There you go. Well, there you have it, everybody. Here Comes Calico with hhgerman. 3 issues are out there available right now. As he mentioned, you go to Kickstarter, go to sigmacomics.com also, right? And check out this wonderful series and old school comics. No ads, right? I mean, it's just pure artwork, storyline, and action. So definitely check it out. And I want to thank hhgerman for joining us here today for this wonderful little chat. Please go check out Sigma Comics, Here Comes Calico, and hopefully an 8-issue run. So we've got issue 4 getting set to come out. I would think probably take us through 2023. I would think that the rate you're going, right? So we got some time left to continue to see this character evolve and get more bad guys. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and go check out Calico, Here Comes Calico. And for Wild Bill, who's not here today, I am Pete Pardo, and for hhgerman, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you all real soon here on Comic Book Geezers. Take care.